In the early 1970s, the fight over abortion access started in Texas. Two attorneys from Dallas, Sarah Weddington and Linda Coffey, initiated a legal battle on behalf of Jane Roe that went to the Supreme Court. In 1973, abortion became a constitutional right across the country. Pro-life, abortion is out there! 50 years later, Roe v. Wade has been overturned, and 26 states plan to ban or severely restrict abortion in the coming months. Texas is one of them, and it's a state at the heart of the debate in the country. It has a trigger law which will make abortion illegal, except in cases where the mother's life is in danger. The state already had a 6-week ban on abortion known as the Texas Heartbeat Act, or Senate Bill 8. It was enacted last September, and it meant that women more than 6 weeks pregnant would need to travel out of state to legally end their pregnancies. In partnership with the Austin American-Statesman and its chief politics reporter, Madeleine Meckelberg, we traveled to Texas to meet people on different sides of the story. What we documented in Texas reveals how intense the abortion debate will be now that the Supreme Court has returned the high-stakes decision to the states.
It's 5 a.m. and we've been invited to join a group of pregnant women who are gathering to travel to New Mexico to access legal abortion. At the time we filmed this story, abortion was still legal in Texas before 6 weeks of pregnancy, but these women didn't make the cutoff. We're allowed to follow them, but most of them asked that they not be named or seen on camera.
God loves you. You have dignity and worth. Your life is the priority here. And so if you're surprised that a person of faith like me is standing in front of you saying that, that's a good thing. The church isn't here to convert you or do anything weird, right? We're just here because service is our prayer.
The mood in the room is tense. All of the women are women of color who appear to be in their 20s. In partnership with an abortion clinic and a sister organization in New Mexico, Reverend Daniel Cantor helps facilitate a one-day trip to Albuquerque, where these women will have abortions.
We don't believe that you are sinful. We don't believe any shame about this. We believe you should have the right to decide if, when, and with whom you have a child. We want to say to you today that people of faith are also in support of abortion.
The trip is subsidized, and all of these women qualify because they're eligible for Medicaid in Texas. After many conversations about sensitivity and confidentiality, we're allowed to join these women on their journey. There's a full 17-hour day ahead that includes a plane ride to and from Albuquerque, 650 miles away. This is the first time cameras have been allowed on the trip.
That would be right. That would be cool.
When we arrive, 15 women are shuttled back and forth from an abortion clinic. They'll either have a surgical abortion or receive the abortion pill. At the offices of the New Mexico Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, we're allowed to sit in the waiting room to see if one of the women will share her story with us on camera.
I have a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and then a 6-month-old.
Walk me through kind of what goes through your mind after you found out.
I was scared. I was in panic. I suffer with anxiety, so my anxiety kind of spiked, and I kind of hyperventilated myself from getting so anxious from finding out the news. When I went, they told me I was 6.5 weeks. I didn't want to have 2 children kind of under the age of 1 again, with the shortage of Similac, having to do either WIC or food stamps, not being able to financially even support or even make enough to feed another mouth.
What would you have done if you couldn't come to New Mexico for an abortion?
God, who knows, because I was already asking people like, hey, what could I do? I've known some women to just kind of take it into their own hands and do like their own abortion. Like I had a friend tell me she drank a cap of bleach, you know. I had another woman tell me, girl, like just take a whole bunch of vitamin C. So yeah, it is pretty scary. It's your life. If you're not ready, you're not ready. And no one should force you to be ready.
The New Mexico Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice pays for the women's plane tickets and handles all of the logistics once the women arrive in New Mexico.
For most people in Texas, Albuquerque is one of the closest locations. We started our plane trips December of last year to 2021. It was kind of our reaction to Senate Bill 8. And we have been doing a trip from Dallas every other week since then. I fear that when the Supreme Court does make a decision, that access will be limited for almost half of our country. And the clinics that will remain open, we just won't be able to help everyone that's needing the help.
It's estimated that there are roughly 900,000 abortions in the U.S. every year. The 26 states that plan to ban or severely restrict abortion are concentrated in the south and central parts of the country, which means some women will have to travel thousands of miles across multiple state lines to legally end their pregnancies.
I found out last week that there was like a heartbeat in the sonogram, and I was just like really hard on myself because I was like, I waited too late. I should have been more on it.
Desiree is 22 years old, and this is the first time she's been pregnant. She told me it was hard to figure out where to go for help. At first, she mistakenly went to a crisis pregnancy center, one of about 200 in Texas that exist to dissuade women from having abortions. She says the counselor encouraged her not to get a sonogram, a delay that ultimately put her past the 6-week deadline for abortions in Texas.
She said, well, based on what you've told us, it sounds like you're only 4 weeks and something days. And she's like, so it's still way too early to do a sonogram. And then she just was like talking to me about, are you sure that you want to, have an abortion? And she kept asking that question, I think, like so many times. I was just like, I don't want to have a kid though. Like I'm mentally not there, physically, I can't. And I'm trying to go back to college this fall, so it was like, it wouldn't work out.
Eventually, Desiree was able to get an appointment at the Southwestern Women's Surgery Center. There, she learned she was 1 or 2 days past the cutoff and would have to travel out of state to have an abortion. Can you tell me a little bit about your own personal history and how that factored into the decision? I know you were talking about your siblings earlier.
Well, there's 6 of us, but I'm the oldest out of everyone. And my mom, she was also like doing drugs. And sometimes she would just leave me and my other brother, who's a year younger than me, like home alone. And we would have to just take care of my little siblings and like figure it out and like wonder when she would come back. Going through that at such a young age, it's like, damn, I don't know if I want kids. Like, there's a lot of things that are like behind closed doors that people go through. It's not just about having a kid. People who are trying to fight this will really ever understand something like that.
A few days before the journey to New Mexico, I spoke with the medical director at the Dallas abortion clinic where the women were pre-screened for the trip.
Hi, come on in. Let me show you around.
Thank you.
The nature of what I do has changed drastically. So some of the patients that I've seen, I've had to turn away personally. A patient who was diagnosed with a lethal fetal anomaly, who was forced to carry that pregnancy until its own demise. A patient who was in a violent relationship with her partner, realized that she was pregnant, was eligible for having an abortion under the restrictive SB 8, but needed more time to decide whether or not she actually wanted to have that abortion. A 15-year-old who was the daughter of an undocumented immigrant who had been raped by a family member, who was ineligible, and her mother couldn't travel with her out of state in order to obtain that care.
Now that Roe v. Wade is overturned, doctors in Texas will be criminalized for performing abortions, and almost all women who want to end their pregnancies will be turned away.
There are going to be increased rates of maternal mortality, especially among Black, brown, and other people of color. There's going to be increased rates of infant deaths from anomalous fetal diagnoses. And we're going to have to switch to harm reduction strategies. This is no longer going to be a Texas issue. We're no longer going to be able to see 50% of the patients that seek abortion care. It's going to be 0% of patients. And that is a new reality that, as much as we try to prepare for and as much as we try to plan for, nobody's ready for that. But we're going to keep fighting. And if we aren't able to provide abortion services directly to patients in Texas, we will help them get that care in other states.
After the recent Supreme Court ruling ending Roe v. Wade, the laws around abortion will be left to individual states, but some communities are trying to take matters into their own hands. Athens, Texas is a town an hour southeast of Dallas, known for its black-eyed peas and hamburgers. It has about 13,000 residents. In the late 1960s, a local doctor started performing illegal abortions in Athens. It was pre-Roe v. Wade, and women came from all over the country for the procedure. The clinic closed decades ago, but some Athens residents are trying to undo that legacy. They're hoping to pass their own restrictive laws this year that would take the Texas abortion ban further and designate the town what they call a sanctuary city for the unborn. Today they are praying at the site where those early illegal abortions were performed.
I pray that this effort here in the city of Athens would be steps towards righting a great wrong in the city, and that Athens would be a city of life.
The movement is being led by Mark Lee Dixon, an East Texas native who has been traveling around the state for the past 3 years, helping towns and cities ban abortions. Mark is 36 and is a self-proclaimed virgin. He runs an organization called Right to Life of East Texas and says protecting the rights of the unborn child is his calling.
I'm against abortion, period. That the taking of an innocent life made in the image of God, it shouldn't be.
What do you say to doctors who say that before viability, a fetus is in development, it's not a human life yet?
Just because a human being is not able to survive on their own, that's not a reason to end that life.
Mark has had success helping local abortion bans pass in more than 40 cities and towns across Texas, along with a few in Nebraska, Ohio, Iowa, and Louisiana. If Mark and his group of volunteers can get enough residents in Athens to sign petitions, an abortion ban will be voted on later this year. What restrictions go on the books in these cities once the ordinances are passed?
So these ordinances outlaw abortion from the moment of conception and outlaw aiding and abetting an abortion within the city limits of these communities. They also outlaw the possession and distribution of the morning after pill.
In that post-Roe world, is there space for these local ordinances still, or are these redundant?
We know that there's DAs out there that have said that they're going to ignore the abortion laws. We never know what leadership is going to do. We don't know if our leadership is going to pull in Austin, Texas and say, we're going to put this at the lowest priority level. And so there is a need to make sure private enforcement at the local level is on the books. The Athens ordinance has it to where if an abortion is performed on an Athens resident, regardless of where that abortion takes place, then the abortionist and anyone who aids and abets the abortionist could be sued for performing the abortion on an Athens resident.
Like most small towns in Texas, Athens is heavily Republican, and at the county level voted 80-20 in favor of former President Trump in 2020. While there's no data to reflect how many residents oppose abortions, driving around we notice a church every few blocks. Most of them are evangelical, a denomination of Christianity that's been largely behind the movement to end abortion in the United States. Mark and his supporters believe they'll find a captive audience in Athens.
Tell me about your family.
My husband and I have been married for almost 20 years. We have 7 kids, 2 biological and 5 adopted. We did foster care for 4 years, and during the 4 years we had 15 different kiddos come in our house, and we adopted 5. And I know some of their moms did consider abortion, and I'm very happy that they chose life. I feel like a lot of times the conversation is, if we abolish abortion, there's going to be this unwanted amount of babies on doorsteps, and who's going to take care of them? And I feel like you're not giving enough credit to the American people that we would step up and care for those kids in need.
At a volunteer event for the Sanctuary Cities campaign, organizers are feeling confident that religion will guide the town's residents.
We working our tails off. I do believe that it's going to pass, because if God is in it, it will pass.
Has the reception been generally positive to the ordinance?
We have some church leaders who believe that it is a political thing, but no. When we talk about the unborn children, that is a spiritual thing. And I always quote Jeremiah, who said, I knew you before you were even formed in your mother's womb.
But not all Athens residents agree that it is the role of city government to get involved on issues like abortion. Earlier this year, the mayor and the city council made the decision not to put the ordinance on the town's agenda.
I will always do what I can to represent the people of Athens fairly. But I must do what I feel is the right and ethical thing to do. If we pass this ordinance as a council, we are passing an ordinance that the city government itself has absolutely no governing authority over. So imagine the precedent that sets. And now what we've said is the policing authority is you, the private citizen, and who can you find that you can sue? And I have to say, as a person of faith myself, as a Jesus follower, I don't think that's very Christ-like.
Unfortunately, religious leaders have allowed their pulpits to become political pundits instead of a place where Christ is preached in its fullness, which means grace.
Pastor Seth Davidson is the lead pastor at a Lutheran church in Athens. While he says he believes that life begins at conception, he fears that taking an absolute stance on abortion can alienate people.
I had a girl that came in right before worship, and she said, Pastor, can I be a Christian and have an abortion? If I say yes, what are the consequences? She could make a decision one way or another, good or bad. If I say no and she's already had it, I could be giving her a sentence of eternal damnation in her mind.
What are your concerns for the residents here and the culture in Athens should this ordinance be adopted?
My biggest concern is to turn away folks from the church. The church needs to continue to be the solution and not the problem. Jesus always talks to people. And for some reason, we miss that when we talk about abortion. It's like we just forget about people completely. We want to talk to people and not just ideologies.
With the news that the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, many fear that the conservative movement will now go after other reproductive rights, including contraception.
I personally am not for birth control, but I have no desire to pass any ordinance banning birth control. Emergency contraception, like Plan B, I do believe that those products should be banned because they can cause an abortion. When we're looking at what women can do to prevent pregnancy, I think the answer is they don't have to have sex. They don't have to have sex at a time in which they know that they could get pregnant.
It's not just contraception that women's rights advocates fear is in jeopardy. In January, in Starr County, Texas, a woman was charged with murder for allegedly self-managing her own abortion after a hospital alerted the police. The charges were quickly dropped, but the woman, Lizelle Herrera, spent 3 days in jail. Currently, there is no law in Texas that criminalizes mothers.
Do you think women should be criminalized for having abortions?
I believe that there needs to be equal protection across the board. If the unborn child truly is human, then if the mother is involved in the killing of that child, then why is she not treated as someone involved in the murder of another human being? That's a question that is out there, and I think it's valid.
So do you feel your side has won?
I believe I'm on the winning side, but there's more battles to be fought. We are always going to have to fight for life. This is something that for 50 years we have wrestled with, and now it's coming to an end.
The First Unitarian Church of Dallas helped organize the journey of the 15 women we followed. It has a long history with abortion in Texas.
So go in peace and walk softly on your path. And may God shine in you all the days of your life. Amen. We're walking right into the space that would have been the place where the women in the late 60s were meeting.
Many of the women's rights activists behind Roe v. Wade were members of the church. And Dr. Curtis Boyd, who performed those early abortions in Athens, Texas, also sat in the pews.
Do you see the work you're doing today as a continuation of that legacy?
Absolutely. This is, I always tell anybody, I'm standing on the shoulders of the women who launched this.
Reverend Cantor says one reason he's active in the abortion rights movement is because he wants Americans to know that not all people of faith are anti-abortion.
So I steeled myself and started researching the abortion clinic.
A big point in this conversation from the religious perspective is at what point life begins. What's your take on that issue?
All religions have different ideas about this. Jews believe life begins when a child takes its first breath. The evangelicals and the Catholics who believe this starts at conception are on their own. Muslims believe the soul enters the fetus at 20 weeks. And I think the ideology around it is being enforced on us by a certain interpretation of Christianity.
Why do you choose to help women in this way around such a controversial issue?
It's basically, to me, it's a war on the poor. The poorest women in our communities are going to be largely affected by this. We're basically setting ourselves up for a massive public health crisis in America. We're going to see deaths, we're going to see a lot of births, and there's no adoptive service in America that can handle 30,000 more children in the system a year. And that's just the state of Texas.
Do you have any fears of legal repercussions for the work you're doing here?
I don't want to go to prison, but I will help people as long as I am working within the law. The law says that you can't aid and abet someone who has an abortion. We're not doing that. We're putting people on airplanes. So until they pass some kind of abortion travel bans that are going to be hard to enforce, I mean, imagine America with checkpoints at airports and on highways with sonogram machines where every woman has to go through and get checked if she's pregnant or not. I don't know how they're going to do this. These are very concerning laws. They should concern everybody in America who's concerned about personal freedoms.
Now that women have lost the constitutional right to have an abortion, Reverend Cantor says he plans to expand his travel program.
People feel like when Roe goes away that we've lost, the fight is over. But what I'm saying is actually the fight is on. That is the stimulus for people to wake up and start organizing.